My name
How are you
is
doing,
Raul
Judge?
Figueroa, Judge of the Court of Claims. I have the honor today of interviewing Judge Raul Figueroa, retired judge from the Buffalo City Court. Judge, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you, please, to share your personal background. Where are you from? Where did you grow up, and what schools did you attend?
I grew up. I was born in Puerto Rico, in Santurce, Puerto Rico, and I lived there until the age of 12. And from there, my family moved to Western New York, to Dunkirk, New York. When I left Puerto Rico, I was in the 7th grade, and unfortunately, when my transcript went from Puerto Rico to Dunkirk, it only went up through the 4th grade. So I ended up having to go through 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th twice. As a result of that, I graduated at age 21. I graduated from Dunkirk High School in 1967, and I then went to Fredonia College, State University of New York at Fredonia. I got a degree in liberal arts Spanish, and from there I then went to the University of Buffalo Law School, which I graduated from in 1977.
And after you graduated from law school, what was your initial position?
When I graduated from law school, I ended up working for the CETA program, Comprehensive Employment Training Program, and I did that for a little while. And then from there, I ended up working in city court as a warrant clerk. And my job was, there were 5 of us, and we listened to the public come in with complaints, which if we felt they involved criminal activity, we would prepare a complaint and then talk to the judge who was on duty for the month, and have him draw up either a warrant or a notice to come to court. I did that for about a year, and from there I then went and I got a job with this Buffalo City Council office, and I was there for 4 years. And then from there I went to the state attorney's office, and I was there for a year. And from there, I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was there for 89 days. I didn't even get a mug from the coffee club because I was not there long enough. And from there, I was appointed to Buffalo City Court in 1984.
Who appointed you?
Jimmy Griffin. He was the mayor of Buffalo at the time. I think he ended up doing 4 or 5 terms. But when I worked in City Hall, in city court, when I worked in the Corporation Counsel's office, I forgot to put that one in. I worked there for 4 years. I got to know the mayor quite well. And even though there were 22 attorneys on staff, he always called me when he needed some real strong advice. And he knew that I would always tell him the truth. And so when an opening came up in city court, his office called me and asked me if I wanted to become a judge.
Had you always wanted to be a judge?
No. I went to law school with the idea. I spent a year in Bogota, Colombia, and at that time I got to know the people in the U.S. Embassy real well. So my idea of going to law school was to try to work for the Foreign Service. But as you remember, in the mid-'70s, they started killing and kidnapping a lot of the embassy people in South America and Central America. So I decided that was not a good thing to do. So I ended up going to law school.
So prior to becoming a judge, you had a lengthy career in public service.
Yes, I did. I had all those jobs that I indicated in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state office, and the city hall, and and that was it.
What was the Latino landscape in Buffalo at that time?
Well, you mean in terms of the attorneys and judges?
Attorneys and judges and associations.
In terms of attorneys, there were no other Latino attorneys. When I got appointed to the bench, I was the first one ever to be appointed, and I think I might have been and when I got elected to the bench, I was the first one elected in the state of New York, outside of New York City. In terms of attorneys, we had a small group of attorneys. We had a Black and Hispanic Attorneys Association, which I was one of the founding members. And we probably had, I would guess, maybe around 6 attorneys or 7 attorneys. And a lot of them have been out about the same length of time that I have been. And in terms of Hispanic associations, there were a couple of different associations. There was a Hispanic club, Hispanic Puerto Rican social club, but they also did a lot of things for the community. We also had a program called Estudia, which helped the community with various things, and a lot of social services work. We also had the Puerto Rican Chicano Committee that also did a lot of work with the social work with the community, and they also did a lot of work with the police department.
What year were you appointed to the Buffalo City Court?
I was appointed April of '84, and it's kind of interesting because I had just come back from my 3 weeks of litigation training in Washington, D.C. And I went through the first half of the litigation training. They had 2 phases. One was civil and one was criminal. And I had just come back and finished the civil litigation program. And when I was called to become a judge.
What political, civil, legal, and other community organizations supported your election campaign?
Well, initially, when I got appointed by the mayor, the mayor had his own independent Democratic bloc, and he really didn't get along well with the Republican, with the Democratic Party, the county or the city Democratic Party. So initially, I was appointed by him. I got his full support, but then I was approached. I was always been a Democrat, and I approached the Democratic Party, and they endorsed me. I then approached the Liberal Party, and they endorsed me. I approached the Republican Party, and they did not endorse me. And the Conservative Party did not endorse me. And what we did, as you know, judges in New York State are allowed to cross-file. So I cross-filed on the Republican Party and the Conservative Party, and I won all 4 lines in the primary. The groups that helped me out were all those. There were a lot of groups, political groups, neighborhood groups that all supported me. One of the biggest boosters at the time was Arthur Eve. Arthur Eve at that time was the second one in charge of the of the House, not the House, but he was a rep, and he came out and supported me. It was the first time that any of the blacks had supported anybody outside of a black. When I got appointed, there was a black that ran against me, and Arthur Eve took me to 30 black churches, and he told all of them that it was time to support a Hispanic, because whenever any black ran, we always supported them. So I got his support. I also there was a lot of the Hispanic groups. Even though they were not political groups, they supported me as well. But one of the biggest boosters that I had was Raul Rusi. Raul Rusi had run for, I think it was councilman the year before, and he lost. But he had this whole machinery in place, and he knew what to do. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think I could have navigated the whole process.
And what challenges or obstacles did you have to overcome on your journey to the bench?
Well, upon being appointed, I have 4 opponents, 4 people that decided to run against me. And it's kind of interesting because a couple of them were colleagues of mine that I had worked with over the years. And so I have 4 people running against me. And that was quite a challenge to overcome. The second hardest thing was that we didn't have enough money. I raised I think I raised about $10,000, and the rest of the money had to come out of my own pocket. But one of the hardest thing was going around and trying to convince people to vote for me. People would say, well, you only have 10,000 Hispanic voters, registered Hispanics in the city. And how are you going to win? And they would say, I would say, I'm not an attorney. I'm an attorney I'm a judge who happens to be Hispanic, but I'm not the Hispanic judge. Because they would ask me, how are you going to rule with other people besides Hispanics? And how are you going to, not give Hispanics preference? And I said, first of all, you're a judge, you have a certain amount of training as an attorney, and you don't look at people that come in front of you and say, well, this person is Hispanic, and therefore I'm going to rule one way. That was one of the things that when I met with the Republican Party, they said to me, Judge, how can you seek our endorsement when you're a Democrat? And I have always been a Democrat. And my answer was, well, when a person appears in front of me, I don't ask what their party affiliation is. It doesn't matter. So that was one of the things that was going around, and again, convincing people to vote for me. And because I had all those different groups that were behind me, including the Democratic Party, the countywide and citywide Democratic Party, I had access to a lot of the clubs and things. And I spent probably 8 months. I went through 4 pairs of shoes and probably about 6 suits. At the end of my campaign, I threw all that stuff in the garbage and just walked away. Because, we spent a lot of time going around, and a lot of times I would do 6, 8, 10 events in a day. And so it was hard, but I was lucky that I had a lot of people working behind me. I had a great team of people. I had a woman who was a Harvard graduate, and she helped me with my speeches and my different things of that sort. I had a lady, a Cuban woman, who organized all kinds of events that anybody that she knew, she organized for me to go visit and to raise money for me. So I had a lot of local support, grassroots support. And that's what I think made a big difference. But the biggest thing was going around and talking to everybody and going to as many events as possible. And of course, when you go to events, you don't eat, you don't drink, you just shake hands. And I always had somebody with me at all times. And sometimes I would do 6, 8, or 10 events, and I would then go on my way home, go to Burger King and get a burger at 11 o'clock at night.
Well, some things about campaigning haven't changed, Judge.
Well, I'm glad I don't have to do it anymore.
What advice do you have for young, aspiring Latino, Latina lawyers that want to become judges?
Well, I think number one, they ought to get involved in community organizations, and they should even get involved while in law school. I was involved while in law school with legal aid and neighborhood legal services and a couple other groups like that. So they should get involved with that, but they should get involved with the agencies in the community and become part of those organizations, because they're the ones that when you decide to do something, if you've been there for them, then they're going to give back to you. And they should also become involved politically and get real involved politically at the city level, or at the county level, especially if you don't know if you're going to be able to run beyond those two. But that would be my advice, to do as much political and community service as possible.
Now, you are one of the founders of the Association of Judges of Hispanic Heritage, which is the precursor to the Latino Judges Association. And thank you for your efforts in that regard. And why was the association formed? And please describe the process that led to the creation of the association.
Well, I was in upstate New York, away from everybody else, but we had a meeting of the yearly meetings that judges have. And that's when we all met and came up with the idea of forming this organization. And the bulk of the work was done by the judges out in New York City. And they would just keep me informed, and they would, the whole idea was to create a group that would connect with each other. And if we needed help or advice, we could advise each other and help each other. And so in that sense, it was good. But again, the politics in New York City and in Buffalo were so different that a lot of times it was hard for me to I never went to any of the meetings because I would do phone meetings, but not in person because I just couldn't get away.
Of course, that was way before the internet, so
yes,
participate
yes,
virtually as we do now. So, and what would you feel is the importance of the association?
Well, I think the association it's important because as issues, for example, when I was a judge, I was appointed to the ethics committee. I don't know if you're familiar with the Judicial Ethics Committee, and I was one of the first members of that committee. And that committee, as you recall, was set up to protect judges against the, what's the other committee? The one that brings judges up on charges. And I think I looked at the Hispanic Association as the same way as protecting the judges and keeping judges informed and trying to make sure that if something doesn't seem right, that we do say something about it. And as you know, being a Hispanic judge, it's unlike anybody else because you're under more scrutiny, and a lot of the things that other people get away with, we can't. And I wouldn't even try. So in that sense, I think that the association is really, really good. And especially now in the age of communications and Zoom and all these other things, I think it's great because you could instantly communicate with other people across the state. And if there's issues that are brewing, which a lot of times the same issues are brewing all across the state, you have a good sense of how to handle it and how to solve the issues.
Do you believe there's greater opportunity for a Latino or Latina lawyer today in a place like Buffalo to become a judge than when you first joined the bench?
I think so. When I ran, Raul Rusi had run for council and he didn't make it. But then after that, David Rivera became a councilman, and I think that with one of the things I believe is that because the Hispanic community has grown and we now have a Hispanic newspaper, we have a lot of Hispanic businesses. We have some Hispanic doctors and dentists. I think that all that helps the community and all that helps people that want to become lawyers, Hispanic lawyers who want to become judges. All that helps because we have a more visible presence. And I think politically, the community has awakened, and that helps because, as you know, whether you get elected as a judge or appointed, it's all comes down to the political base and how you work with that. Judge
Figueroa, what would you like the bench, the bar, and the community to remember about you?
Well, that I always gave everything that I did 120%. And all those jobs that I mentioned in the past, I was always the first Hispanic at any of those jobs. And and even though in a sense, I was a trailblazer, I never really looked at that. I always looked at what I could do at the moment and how I could help people and work with people. And when I took the bench, I felt that was my philosophy. But for the grace of God, I happened to be on one side of the bench as opposed to the other. And I always tried to sympathize, and I always treated litigants, whether they were attorneys, defendants, witnesses, with respect. And I never allowed anybody in my courtroom to be disrespectful to no matter who it was. And if anybody did that, I would always call that attorney aside and talk to him or her in my office and tell them that I did not appreciate that and that I would not have, and that I did not want them to do that again. If they did, then I would chastise them in public. I never ever had to do that. I think two or three times I held people in contempt, and that was because they were mentally ill. Outside of that, I think that, the whole idea is that, you're a judge yourself, that you have to be fair and impartial. And if you don't know something, admit it, and then take your time, go look it up. And because you don't want to make mistakes when you're dealing with people's lives and freedom, you have to be really, really careful. And you have to be absolutely sure that if you find somebody guilty, that they really are guilty. And I had 3 instances in my 18 years as a judge where I called the litigants back and I reversed myself because I woke up in the middle of the night at 3 in the morning. I said, oh my God, I made a mistake. And people were shocked that I did that. But I had to do what I felt was correct.
And Judge, what year did you retire from the bench?
2001. I retired in 2001. Then I moved to Georgia. I took the Georgia bar and I worked in Georgia as a public defender. I made the whole route for several months. I was a drug court attorney for 3.5 years. And then I did some immigration work in private, but not very much. I also established a Hispanic group here in Glynn County, and it's called Hispanics of Hispanics of Glynn, I think, or something. And unfortunately, we only obtained money for a couple years. It's a very, very difficult climate. I hope somebody starts that up again sometime in the future.
Well, Judge Figueroa, on behalf of the Latino Judges Association, I want to thank you for helping to found the organization and wish you continued good health and all the best.
Well,
Thank you.
Same to you. Thank you.